There is no silence that doesn't reveal something about us. In many families, there are no fights, but also no reconciliations, no accusations and no apologies, no tears, but also no hugs. Instead, a finely balanced mix of withdrawal, avoidance, and tact, often mistaken for harmony. Children quickly learn what is better left unsaid, and at some point they begin to feel. There are things that feel wrong, but no one names them, so they hold on to the feeling and pass it on. A 2021 study published by the University of Cambridge shows around 68% of surveyed adults said that in their childhood, emotional topics were avoided within the family. In the same study, 44% reported that they also struggle as parents to openly discuss feelings with their own children. Silence is not an individual failure, it is an inheritance. And transgenerational transmission is no myth. The renowned ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences, which has followed more than 17,000 participants since 1995, proves those who experienced emotional neglect or silence show significantly higher risks of depression, anxiety disorders, and emotional dysregulation, even decades later. The wound remains even if no one looks at it. Chapter 1. Generations. What often looks like functioning is in reality a sophisticated form of self-protection. Don't stand out, don't disturb, don't feel. And so the inner life becomes a blind spot. Feelings? Yes, but only the ones no one finds overwhelming. Sadness? Only if it disappears quickly. Anger? Only inside, and only against oneself. According to an evaluation of the Dunedin study, a long-term project with over 1,000 participants, people who did not learn emotional communication strategies as children have double the risk of psychosomatic disorders in adulthood. The body speaks when words are missing. What is especially dramatic is how early these patterns take hold. By the age of 3, children already respond to emotional taboos of their caregivers with withdrawal or overly adapted behavior. What looks like maturity to outsiders is often just an attempt not to burden anyone. Children who were not allowed to show themselves learn early closeness means risk, so they prefer to stay strong and alone. Later, this develops into so-called false self structures. False self is a mask we build to survive. As children, we learn to hide real feelings, anger, sadness, even joy, because showing them felt unsafe. We grow into adults who smile, function, and care for others, while quietly abandoning our true selves. Personality masks built on functionality rather than authenticity. People smile though they tremble inside. They take care of others even when they are already overwhelmed. And when asked how they are, they answer, "I'm fine." Chapter 2. When words are missing. Not every silence is intentional. Sometimes the vocabulary is simply missing, because no one ever taught how to speak about feelings, because every conversation became a risk, because one learned, "What I say won't matter anyway." This invisibility starts quietly. A child who turns away when sad, a teenager who speaks only through music, an adult who deflects every serious talk with a joke, not out of arrogance, but out of self-protection. A 2022 meta-analysis published by Clinical Psychology Review examined 41 studies on family silences. The result? Emotional avoidance within families correlates significantly with increased irritability, withdrawal, and attachment disorders in adulthood. In other words, those who were not allowed to talk enough later withdraw, not because they don't want closeness, but because they never learned it. Emotional avoidance or speechlessness means you can feel deeply, but you can't put it into words. Maybe no one ever taught you how. So instead of saying "I'm hurt," or I need you, you stay silent. Over time, silence becomes a habit, protecting you, but slowly cutting you off from real connection. Many couples who love each other don't talk, or not about the right things. They talk about shopping, the vacation, the child, but not about the us, not about the fear of becoming strangers. The relationship lives, but it doesn't breathe. But silence is not the same as indifference. It is often the expression of a deep, unregulated emotion. You know something is missing, but the exact word for it is hidden behind a fog. Here begins the misunderstanding. One side stays silent out of fear of being hurt. The other feels hurt because of the silence. So a cycle forms in which no one gets what they need, yet both believe they are alone in it. What makes it worse is that most people don't recognize these patterns as a problem. They call it everyday life, maturity, reason. But what is missing is crucial, a space where feelings are allowed without being solved or analyzed immediately. Language doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be allowed to be honest. Sometimes it's enough to say, I don't know how to put this into words, but it's here. Or, I've been silent for a long time, but I don't want to stay silent anymore. In a large-scale survey of the German family panel, Potifam 2023, 57% of respondents reported they avoided conflicts and close relationships more often than addressing them openly. The reason? Fear of escalation, fear of loss, or fear of revealing themselves. But that is precisely the beginning. To reveal yourself, even if the words still stumble, even if it starts quietly, because no conversation is ever braver than the first honest one. Chapter 3. Functioning instead of feeling. Those who learned early to hold themselves back later learn to function. Punctual, polite, reliable. They know how to be needed, but not what they themselves need. Functioning is the art of bypassing yourself so efficiently that no one notices, and eventually, not even you. Many mistake survival strategies for personality traits. She's just tough. He just never talked much. But behind this often lie ingrained messages such as, if you are weak, you will be abandoned. If you need something, you're a burden. If you show yourself, you're vulnerable. The WHO now lists emotional self-awareness as one of the most important resilience factors for mental health. But those who were never allowed to read their inner world live in a constant gap between inside and outside. The facade stands, but the foundation crumbles. A 2021 study by the Max Planck Institute of Psychiatry showed chronically suppressed emotions triple the risk of burnout, because emotional suppression is not a neutral state. It requires energy, focus, control, and it demands discipline against oneself. Those who function are often rewarded at work and relationships in daily life. You're reliable, efficient, calm, but no one asks if you are alive. Yet aliveness is not loud. It shows itself in nuances, in the ability to say no, in the freedom to be sad, in the decision not to be perfect. Many only realize late that their life no longer relates to them. They feel everything, but vaguely. They don't know what the fatigue is answering to. They don't understand why every small thing overwhelms them. And they believe the problem lies in them, but often it lies in years of silence. Part of this dynamic is structural. Societies praise efficiency, not emotion. Schools measure performance, not empathy. Workplaces reward resilience, not emotional intelligence. Even in friendships or partnerships, the rule is often deal with it or don't come. Those who need space to feel are seen as complicated. Those who set boundaries as sensitive. Those who become honest as unstable. But the opposite is true. Emotional self-connection is not withdrawal. It is the foundation for connection with others. And sometimes it begins with a moment of pause, a moment in which you don't react, but perceive, not perform, but listen. Not to the world, but to yourself. Chapter 4. The Silent Inheritance. There are families where everything was said, except the essential. And there are people who spend their whole lives searching for words that were never spoken, not because they didn't matter, but because no one knew how. Silence becomes a language that slips between generations, not loud, not tangible, but effective. It shapes decisions, relationships, self-images, how we allow closeness, how we show anger, how we speak to ourselves. A 2020 study by the University of Wisconsin proves emotional taboos in the parent generation can lead to so-called implicit scripts in children, inner beliefs like feelings burden others, or I must never show weakness. These scripts govern behavior even if they were never spoken out loud. What was not said is still heard, in the gaps between sentences, in the way someone stays silent, in the question that is never asked. Silence is especially powerful when tied to shame, because shame needs darkness to survive, and silence creates that darkness. Many carry stories within them that are not their own, an anger that doesn't fit, a fear that cannot be explained, a pressure older than themselves. What helps is not always a conversation with others, but often a conversation with yourself. What was missing from me? What was I never allowed to say? What would I want to hear if I could meet my younger self today? Healing does not begin with the perfect sentence. It begins with permission. Permission to take yourself seriously, to believe yourself, to listen to yourself. A qualitative survey of over 1,400 therapy patients, BPTK 2022, shows the greatest relief in healing does not come with solving a problem, but in the moment when people are allowed to acknowledge their inner truth, not justify it, not prove it, just acknowledge it. For this, you don't need dialogue, but space. A safe space where you are not judged, but understood. A moment with no audience, only one voice, your own. And eventually you realize you don't need to say everything to be free. Sometimes it's enough to stop forcing yourself into silence. Because finding words for the unspoken not only breaks your own silence, but often an entire line of it. Maybe it's not about saying everything. Maybe it's enough to stop silencing yourself. Because what we never said didn't make us smaller. It only showed how great the longing was to be heard. Silence separates, but honesty connects. Even if it stumbles, even if it hurts, even if it starts out quietly. And maybe it starts today with a letter that will never be sent, with a thought that is finally taken seriously, with a moment in which you listen to yourself. You don't have to feel perfectly. You don't have to understand everything. You don't have to heal it all at once, but you are allowed to begin, because every word you find for what had no place is a step back to yourself. Stay honest, stay awake, stay loud.